Our reading this morning is a parable of Jesus from the book of Luke. This is the only gospel that this particular story appears. So it's interesting what Luke has to say. Jesus has been talking about prayer, and he gives us this lesson. In a certain city, there was a judge who neither feared God nor had respect for people. We don't know any politicians like that, I'm just saying. In that city, there was a widow who kept coming to him and saying, "Grant me justice against my opponent." For a while he refused, but later he had said to himself, "Though I have no fear of God and no respect for anyone, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will grant her justice so that she may not wear me out by continually coming." This is the word of God for the people of God. Please be seated. Though I really don't care about anybody, she's bugging the heck out of me, so I'm going to give her what she wants. As I said, this story comes as Jesus is talking about praying and how they should pray. And different commentaries over the years have seen different things in this. One of the common, and Jesus does go on to say, is if this bad judge will do justice, God, who is a good judge, will do justice even more. And so you should keep praying. And that's a pretty good way to look at this passage. But as I looked at it, a couple of things occurred to me. The widow doesn't just sit home praying. In fact, what the widow does, first of all, is she goes to court every day. Because that's how court was held. The judge was there, and the people waited in line, and they saw the judge. Now, I have very recent experience of waiting in a government office because, and I should probably say this because it's being recorded, but my driver's license expired a while ago. And so, one has to go to the Department of Public Safety. I have not gotten a ticket. I'm lucky. No one has. I drive safely. So I not only do I have to go to not the tag agency, but the Department of Public Safety, but I had to find my passport or my original birth certificate. And I did, after tearing the house apart and making Charlie look everywhere, I did find my passport. It actually had fallen underneath the drawer, and it was under there. So I found my passport, and I had my insurance card, woohoo for me. And I went and got to them when they opened at 7. And I had ticket 95. I thought, okay. Well, I had a 1 o'clock appointment that I had to keep. It was my hair appointment, by the way. 1 o'clock appointment that if you miss, you're done to the next month. So I had to go. And at 12:15, they were still only on number 89. And so I had to leave without getting it done. So I will be there again on Monday when I have no appointment. So I know what this widow went through. Waiting and waiting and waiting for the judge to grant her justice. And if I could have done what she had done, I would do it. What she then did was she started going to his house. And if I knew somebody on that board who could give me my driver's license, I'd be at their house too. And she went to his house after the court closed, I'm sure, and she knocked. And he looked out the window and said, "Go away!" And she knocked. And so he just didn't answer. And all the neighbors were looking at, "What's up with that?" And she knocked. He didn't answer. And day after day after day, that widow came and knocked and knocked and knocked and knocked. And as the story says, finally he said, I'm going to just go give it to her because she's just going to wear me out, but she's not going to give up. And one of the translations, one of the more modern translations of this passage, instead of saying, what does it say? She will wear me out by continually coming. Actually, they say it's more accurate to say, because she's going to slap me upside the head if I don't. Literally, she will hit me in the eye if I don't give her justice, so I better do it. The widow didn't just sit at home and pray. She prayed with her feet and with her hands. I would imagine she knocked on that door until not only were her knuckles red and raw and swollen, that were probably bleeding too, but she knew injustice, and she prayed with all of her being, persistently, for it to be righted. Just a few weeks ago, several of us were together in Washington, D.C., the seat of democracy and justice, as reconciling Methodists wanting justice and literally knocking on the doors of justice for it. And there were tears at the injustices that still are. And in the opening address, as Joe shared with us Wednesday night, one of the pastors from New York, she works in Greenwich Village, is where her parish is, she said, "Why are we still here?" The allusion was to the passage in Paul, where Paul and Silas are in jail and there's an earthquake and the bars break. And the jailer's like, oh my gosh, I should kill myself because all my prisoners are gone and they're going to kill me, so I better do it before they do it to me. And just as he's about to kill himself, Paul says, we're still here. Why? Why did they stay in jail? Why? They were free. They had been arrested unjustly, beaten, chained, and here the chains had fallen away, the bars had broken, they could walk out. But they stayed. Why? Why do we stay knocking and knocking and knocking? Listen to the words of 2 Timothy that Paul writes to Timothy. I urge you, beloved, proclaim the message. Be persistent, whether the time is favorable or unfavorable. Convince, rebuke, and encourage with the most patience in teaching. Be sober, endure suffering, do the work of an evangelist, carry out your ministry. Whether the times are favorable or unfavorable, persist in doing the call of the kingdom. That's, I believe, why Paul and Silas stayed. It was their calling to stand up and say, we were preaching the gospel, the good news of Christ, and if you're going to arrest us for that, we'll stay. But it's wrong. But we're going to make you know it's wrong. Why do we stay? Because someone has to continue. Even if our knuckles get swollen and red and bleeding. And it's hard. And it's exhausting. And we get tired. And we lose our enthusiasm. And I've got to tell you, there are times that if I see another rainbow, I want to pluck out my eyes. I just get tired of the rainbows. But then I remember what that means, I remember that there are people that are outside. And my call is to make the circle wider. There were tears of frustration at Churchquake, but there were tears of joy as well. My colleagues to the west, and I would point west and east, but as Carl knows, I don't know what those directions are. East, west, east, north. Woo! In the west, bishops have said all people are worthy of all the ministries that a pastor can give, all of them. If you see a discipline that says differently, that is not true to the spirit of the discipline. Our book of discipline says all are deserving. And so you, the pastors in my jurisdictions, are to do what is right. And the videos of that worship service show how many of our colleagues in the West are doing just that. And on the East Coast, they are doing just that. And on the coast of Lake Michigan, in northern Illinois, they are doing just that. And I sat thinking about the South. Where are we in this? And before I could get too sad, I recalled, oh yeah, in Oklahoma, over 300 clergy and laity wore rainbow stoles at our annual conference just a few months ago. Over 300 wore them, knowing, because they had a tag inside and we didn't give them out unless we knew they knew, that this means you're for full inclusion of all people. And they wore them. In Oklahoma, clergy stood up to give presentations in front of the entire annual conference. Over 500 clergy, over 500 laity, with full inclusion stoles on, unapologetically stating, this is important. This symbolizes people excluded. And we aren't standing for it anymore. In Texas, they are doing the same. As we met with our southern jurisdiction, we started making plans. And one of the plans that we've got just for us is, instead of having an Epworth float in Pride Parade and a St. Stephen's float in Pride Parade, we are marching together. And we have invited any reconciling Methodists in the area, Oklahoma, anywhere, to march with us. We will have t-shirts that have the same emblem on the back, love your neighbor, our own individual logos on the front, and each church or group will have a different color of the rainbow. And we will make a human rainbow at the Oklahoma City Pride Parade this year, at the Tulsa Pride Parade this year. We are standing together. We are making more stoles this year. We will hand out more. At the Progressive Retreat, we will remind our pastors that there are stoles that we need you to wear. You said you would. So many things are dovetailing for me. I'm working with a group bringing Rita Brock to Oklahoma. She was here last year for the Progressive Retreat talking about her book, Saving Paradise. This year, the book that she's come out with is called Moral Injury, and it deals most specifically with veterans, with soldiers. Moral injury has to do with the damage done to your soul when you are forced to do things and see things that are contrary to your religious beliefs. Specifically thinking about the atrocities that are done in wartime, that good Christians, good Muslims, good faithful people have to do and are taught to do in order to survive. And that breaks their soul, literally. And I did make it through half of Apocalypse Now Friday night. And watching the graphicness of what the soldiers had to do with that book in my mind and the injury that it did to them. But then I couple that with the Progressive Retreat talk about violence and bullying, and I know that those segments of the population, the LGBT segments of the population, have more violence done to them, have more bullying. And I thought about that moral injury, and all this kind of came together. And I wonder, and I will ask Rita this, and I will ask those counselors and therapists that I know about this too. But I wonder if our Christian society, our Methodist church, has done moral injury to LGBT population, because we tell them that their very being is in contradiction to what they should believe. We tell them that they are an abomination, yet all are accepted by God. What moral injury must we be doing to those folk and others? Why do we keep knocking? God has set resistance to the force of evil in motion. You see, I don't think that judge is God. I don't think that judge stands for God. I think in that parable, that judge is all those who oppress. All those who oppress with laws, oppress with rules, oppress with words, oppress with fists, who oppress and withhold health care, who oppress and withhold food, who oppress and withhold marriage. That's who that judge is. And God has constantly, persistently saying, beloved children, knock on that judge's door. Knock, 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 until the judge is tired. As believers, we are called to join God's resistance, to be the praying hands and feet of that resistance. Churchquake. When the believers churchquake, the foundations start to shake and the walls will break. And the kingdom, the paradise, the reign of God will be, but only if we persist. Tired, sore knuckles. We are called to knock. I'm not ready to stop knocking. And I hope you aren't either. As we go to prayer, let us ask God to show us where we need to knock this week. Let us be in prayer.